Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth lesson of the Unit 13 on the European and National Agricultural Fundings. I am Giampiero Mazzocchi, and today I will guide you through the second pillar of the CAP, so the pillar that deals with rural development and environment. Just a quick recap of what we have learned so far. So in the first video, we have understood why agriculture needs public support. So we have seen the multiple challenges in terms of food security, income stability, provision of public goods, and rural vitality. In the second video, we have seen the CAP structure and functioning. So the two pillars, the national strategic plans, the performance-based approach. In the third video, we have explored the first pillar, the most important in terms of a financial budget, in terms of incomes for farmers, so direct payments, eco schemes, market measures, and coupled support. Today we will explore the second pillar. So the pillar that deals with rural development. So we will see how this pillar contribute to structural change for farming and environmental protection. We will see also the budget that is dedicated to this pillar that differently from Pillar 1 is co-financed by national fundings. And we will see that in Pillar 2, the mechanism is a little bit different from Pillar 1, as the commitments are on multi-year and the project is the support is based on projects presented by farmers. So, what the Pillar 2 provides? The Pillar 2 is a big tank within which we can find several kind of supports. We will go into detail of each one, but for the moment it's important to remember that Pillar 2 provides support for structural improvements in farming, environmental and climate actions, rural territorial development, and innovation and knowledge transfer. So the objective of this pillar is not just to provide an extra income for farmers, but to help their transformation, their innovation, their compatibility with environmental limits and respecting natural resources. So the key differences from Pillar 1 is that on Pillar 2, the commitments are multi-annual and not annual like in Pillar 1. For example, if you remember, eco schemes are based on commitments that farm sign on an annual time frame. The selection is based on projects presented by farmers, and it is not automatic as the Pillar 1. In the Pillar 1, you just have to comply with environmental and social conditionality. You have to own eligible hectares, but the provision of funding, the provision of the subsidies from Pillar 1 is more or less automatic. In Pillar 2, no, you have to present a certain project and there is a selection of the best projects to be financed. And also the other very important aspect is that in Pillar 2, the projects are co-financed with national or regional budgets. Then we will see that the co-financing can be at national level, at regional level, or also at farmer level. So the application process is more complex because the projects to be presented are quite demanding in terms of administrative procedures and also on the demonstration of the efficiency of the projects. But there is a greater flexibility in design because in the rural development measures you will find a broad range, a wide array of possibilities, and a wide array of to define your own project. In the budget 23-27, there are approximately 96 billion euros from EU contribution, but they achieve 150 billion euros with the national co-financing. And approximately in the pillar 2, we found 20%, so 1/4 of the total CAP budget. The fund that provides financial resources to pillar 2 is different from pillar 1. In case of pillar 2, we have the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development. So let's have a look to this fund more in detail, because it is important. It is different from the fund that support direct payments. So in this kind of fund, the EU provides a certain percentage of funding. The member states or regions provide the rest, so by co-financing the support, and together the resources, so from the EU and from the member states or region, they form the total budget available for the pillar 2. The rate of co-financing vary among the kind of development of regions, and the less the regions are developed, the more is the contribution from the EU, as you can see from this table. For example, in the less developed regions, so regions that have a GDP below the 75% of the EU average, like Bulgaria, Romania, some regions of Poland, Greece, and Portugal, the EU contribution is up to 85%. Okay, so it means that national authorities or regional authorities have to consider just the 15% of the total investment for the pillar 2 in order to achieve the 100%. So this rate is lower, for example, for transition regions, and even lower for more developed regions like Germany, France, Netherlands, some regions of Italy, where the financing from the EU is 43%, while the rest, so the 57%, is financed by national or regional authorities. So let's imagine, for example, an investment project that costs 100,000 euros. So in less developed regions, the EU pays 85,000 euros, while the national authorities put 50,000 euros, etc. And in more developed regions, the rate is different, so the EU pays less, so 43,000 euros, and etc. In the previous lessons, I have already mentioned ring fencings. What do I mean with ring fencing? Ring fencing is when a certain amount of resources is mandatory dedicated to a certain objectives. So is to vinculate some resources to certain objectives that have been considered strategic for European Union and for sustainability objectives. Indeed, the CAP Strategic Plans Regulation sets a minimum or maximum financial allocation for some interventions within the fund for rural development. Indeed, 35% of the budget for Pillar 2 is dedicated to climate, environmental, and animal welfare objectives. 5% of the budget is to be reserved for leader programs, and then we will see what is leader. It's a bottom-up approach for communities, for developing communities in rural areas. Okay, and a maximum of 4% of the total budget for rural development can be used by member states to finance the actions of technical assistance. In the rural development, this is set by the regulation. the regulation that has been approved by European Parliament and the European Council after the proposal of the Commission, we find 8 typologies of policy measures that span from environmental climate object measures to support to natural or other area with specific constraints. Then there is a support for areas with specific disadvantages resulting from certain mandatory requirements. A lot of resources are also dedicated to investments. A key objectives of the rural development is also the generational renewal in the sector. So an important share of resources is reserved to installation of young farmers and rural business startups. Then you find risk management tools, and we have already seen in the previous lesson that climate hazards and climate shocks are increasingly impacting agricultural sectors. So it's important to provide for tools to reduce these impacts in terms of financial resources for farms. Also, you find measures dedicated to cooperation, not only among farmers but also with other actors along the food supply chain and with academia. And also the last typology is the knowledge exchange and information measures. We will see more in detail all these kind of typologies of policy measures. I will start from investments, because investments they cover the most of the resources under the pillar 2. In the investments you can apply for projects that regard the construction of or modernization of farm buildings, the purchase of machinery and equipment, irrigation systems and water management, renewable energy installations, animal welfare improvements, processing and marketing facilities, and digital technologies and precision farming. This is a not complete list of costs, expenses that can be funded through this fund, but it's just some examples. In investments projects, you as farmer, you have to demonstrate economic viability of the projects, and you have to build a business plan, while at the same time providing elements in where you can demonstrate the environmental standard respect. And in this kind of investments, the innovation and sustainability are encouraged. In the investments typology of investment typology, typically the financing from the EU is from 40 to 50% of the eligible costs. This percentage is higher for young farmers and higher also in disadvantaged areas. And also usually countries set maximum aid per project that can vary from 500,000 to 2 billion euros. The application process is based on competitive calls for proposal, and the projects are evaluated against selection criteria, and there are some priorities that are, for example, granted for, as I already said, for young farmers, disadvantaged areas, but also for female farmers and other preferences, selection criteria. As I already said, one of the most important concern for the current European Commission mandate is the generational renewal. So an important part of the Pillar 2 is dedicated to young farmers startup support. It is important to now remember that also in Pillar 1 we have an additional extra premium for young farmers. And you can, as a young farmer, you can add also the fundings from the Pillar 2. So Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 can be used both from young farmers in order to receive additional premiums per hectare in Pillar 2 and per kind of farms in the Pillar 2. So the purpose is to help young people to establish as farm managers and to overcome financial barriers to entry. Let's consider that, for example, access to land, access to credit is very difficult in the agricultural sector, and especially for young farmers. And as already said, this kind of investment, this kind of typology of measures is complementary with the Pillar 1 young farmer payment. You can receive this kind of payment if you are under 40 years, if you are for the first time setting up as head of a holding, if you own adequate skills to be demonstrated through agricultural education levels or trainings. You have to submit a business plan, and you have to set up in the farm within the previous 24 months. That these months vary by country. When you make application for this kind of support, then your request will be evaluated, and if the evaluation is good, you receive a lump sum payment. So a payment that is provided just one time, typically 40,000, 70,000 euros. Then you receive technical assistance for business planning and priority access to other rural development measures. Let's look, for example, to a real example. A young farmer of 32 years old, he takes over family vineyard of 15 hectares, and the business plan include, for example, modernization of one cellar, new tractor and equipment, conversion to organic farming, and direct sale development. If he applies or she applies for young farmer support under Pillar 2, he or she will receive a startup grant of 50,000 euros paid over 4 years. An investment aid, for example, for all the investments that he or she wants to make in his farm or her farm. So, for example, 80,000 euros against a total investment of more than 100,000 investments, total investment cost. Also, he will or she or he will receive organic conversion support, the young farmer Pillar 1 payment for 5 years, and also he will receive advisory services through business coaching. So in this slide you can see how the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 combine for young farmers support. And this is structural, this is critical for the sector future, because as I already mentioned these figures, the average EU farmer age is 57 years in Europe, and only 11% of farmers is under 40 years. So without this kind of support, young people could not afford to start, also because land prices and access to credit is too high for new entrants. Another big area of Pillar 2 are the agro-environmental climate commitments. These are commitments for environmental services, and they are paid, and this is an extra payment compared to eco schemes. In this case, the AC commitments are voluntary agreements between farmers and public authorities, where farmers commit to specific environmental practices, usually for more than 1 year. For example, in eco schemes you have 1 year commitments. In the agro-environmental climate commitments you have typically 5 years of commitments. And here the annual payments compensate for costs for example, for introducing new practices and that are expensive for farmers, and income foregone. For example, when you introduce some agro-environmental climate practices, probably you will have lower yields. So it means that you will gain less from your farming activity. So this kind of payments compensate farmers for this kind of practices. The payment structure is based on additional costs incurred, plus the income foregone from reduced production, plus the transaction costs. And the payment is calculated per hectare or per animal, and it varies by type of commitment and region. There are different areas that are covered by this kind of payments. You can receive, for example, payments for biodiversity, for soil conservation, for climate actions, for water quality and landscape and heritage. Here, once again, the European Commission regulation has set the overall framework, setting the overall rules that farmers and member states must comply with, but a great subsidiarity and great flexibility has been given to member states to set up the most appropriate agro-environmental climate measure for the territories and for the country's specificities. For example, in Italy, you have 30 agro-environmental climate actions that are based on analysis that has made in the previous, in the early stages of programming period, in order to understand what are the needs, in terms of environmental protection, what are the needs in terms of farmer expectations for this kind of payment. So each member state, each country can set up its own set of agro-environmental climate actions. Within the rural development program, rural development, so the pillar 2, you also find the organic farming support. So both for conversion and maintenance of organic farming. Yeah, indeed, the conversion is the support to conversion is to convert some farms from conventional farming to organic farming. So the conversion payment is higher than the maintenance payment, obviously, because in the beginning you have to cope with higher costs. And for the conversion to organic, the support is granted for the transition period, that is usually 2 or 3 years. Also in this case, the farmer is compensated for conversion costs and lower yields. And the typical payments here is 300 to 900 euros per hectare per year, depending on the crop type. On the other side, you have after the 2 or 3 years of conversion, you enter in the fully in the organic farming scheme. So you are paid for continuing organic farming. Here the payment is lower than the conversion payment. Once again, also here the payment is to compensate farmers for higher costs and lower yields versus conventional farming. Here the typical payment is between 200 to 600 euros per hectare per year. And so, what is the rationale for supporting organic farming? A support for this kind of farming is needed because organic farming has higher production costs, because in many cases for certain crops you have lower yields, so usually from 10 to 30% of reductions in yields. In this kind of in the organic farming, you cannot use synthetic pesticides or fertilizers. So on one side you have less cost for this kind of purchases, but on the other side your production is more risky because you are subject to pests invasions or lower fertilization rates. Uh, in the organic support, the you have more labor intensive management because you have to cope with certification costs, and usually consumers and food industry does not recognize the right premium for organic farming. In Europe today, we have nearly 60 million hectares on organic farming, and the target to 2030 is to achieve the 25% of organic farming. Another kind of support is the support for areas with natural constraints. So this kind of payment is to compensate for disadvantages faced by farms that are located in certain territories that are characterized by, for example, significant natural constraints, for example, difficult climates, difficult soils, or areas with specific constraints, for example, when you have to comply with some environmental legislations. For example, when the farm is located within a Natura 2000 area, that are some particular areas with enhanced environmental objectives. Yeah, the farmer in this case has to comply with more obligations in terms of environmental protection. So it means that he or she has to cope with higher costs. You can access this kind of support if your farm is located in some designated constraint area that are defined by each member state. You have to maintain a minimum agricultural activity, and you have to comply with standards in terms of environmental or legislative standards. In this case, the payment is annual and is done per hectare. Also, in this case, the farmers are compensated for additional costs and income foregone. It is not a payment for investments, but for ongoing farming activities. And the typical payment is range between 50 to 300 euros per hectare per year. Also, the payments here vary by severity of constraints. For example, mountain areas, the payment is higher than other constraints, the type of farming, the size of holding. Also, in this case, is interesting to understand why the support is needed for these areas, because in these areas you have higher production costs because the mechanization is difficult. For example, let's think about how to use a tractor or mechanization processes in a place like the one you can see in this photo. Or sometimes because the terrain is, you have very severe slopes, or the climate is particularly facing challenges. So in these areas, consequently, you have lower yields and productivity. There is a higher risk of land abandonment, and it is important. These territories are crucial for environment and landscape maintenance. What is also interesting to note is these areas cover 58% of EU agricultural areas in 2023. Also, there is a support. In this kind of support, I have mentioned the two examples. For example, mountain area, Italian Alps. Let's think about a dairy farm with 45 hectares mountain pastures. So the constraints here are steep slopes, short grazing season, difficult of access. In this case, the payment could be, for example, 250 euros per hectare, so with an annual support of 11,250 euros. And so without this support, the farmer would abandon activity very likely. And this kind of support maintain alpine landscape and prevent erosion. Another case could be, for example, an area with specific constraint in Cyprus, for example, a carob tree cultivation in dry areas. In this case, the constraints are water scarcity, poor soils, isolation. The payment could be 180 euros per hectare, for example, and this payment is helping to maintain traditional agricultural landscape, to prevent desertification, to preserve for cultural heritage crop. Another kind of support is the cooperation and innovation. It is very interesting. Here in this kind of support, you find very interesting projects. There are several platforms and databases when you can browse through the project that are funded under cooperation and innovation measures of Pillar 2. The cooperation innovation is based on is grounded on these partnerships that are called European Innovation Partnerships, AP Agri. So AP Agri are partnerships among private sector, public sector, civil society, university in order to connect research with practice. In this case, you find very practical, very concrete projects in order to tackle specific issues. And the approach here is bottom up. So the solutions are not identified by, for example, academia, by only academia, but they are discussed with farmers, and they emerge, and the solution emerge as a form of the result of the cooperation between several actors. The AP Agri is based on operational groups that bring together farmers, researchers, advisors, businesses, NGOs, and they identify practical problem or opportunity, and they develop and test innovative solutions. Then the final step is to share results widely in order to inspire and to find also new connections and new attractions from other farmers, other businesses, other advisors, etc., etc. The project duration is typically from 2 to 4 years, and the support covers coordination, the expenses for coordination meetings, trials, demonstrations, and dissemination. In this case, the funding is 80 to 10% of eligible costs. I have reported here just a couple of examples that I have found exactly on the databases that I was mentioning before. For example, in this case, that is based in Romania, the objectives is to identify new hazelnut tree varieties that can withstand weather factors and can be used in the production of dietary supplements. So the practical objectives here are to selecting hazelnut tree varieties that can adapt to climate change, with fruit that has high nutritional value that can be used in the production of dietary supplements. Also, the objective is to replicate the prized hazelnut trees, and to increase the work group production farms' profitability by applying high precision fruit growing technologies. In another example that I have discovered in Portugal, these objectives, this project that is called More Madeira at the Table, the objectives here are different, and I have selected this kind of these two projects in order to make you understand the variety and the broad scope of the EAP Agri operational groups. In this case, the objectives are achieving greater proximity between farmers and the hotel restaurant channel, reinforce local agricultural products and as major basis for Madeiran cuisine, and presentation of agricultural resources at local exhibition throughout the territory. So valuing products and bringing debates and new approaches to existing products that make up the fabric of local gastronomic culture. Other examples from Portugal and Greece, for example, in Portugal, there is a project on precision viticulture for drought adaptation. In this case, you have 81 producers, university, technology company, and advisory service. And the innovation introduced here are sensors, drones, AI for optimal irrigation. And you have also practical results. So 30% of water savings and improved quality of the water. In this case, the budget was 400,000 euros over the 3 years, with possible replication for other viticulture models in the Mediterranean areas. In the case of Greece, another project that I have selected is the organic olive oil blockchain traceability. In this case, you have also technology startups, certification body, and producer organization. So the innovation introduced here is the blockchain-based traceability for a premium market. So in order to make a certain product applicable and more attractive for consumers, because it respects the whole supply chain standards. And the results are higher prices, consumer trust, and export growth. In this case, the budget was 350,000 euros over 2 years, and the project has combined sustainability with digital innovation. I will stop the lesson here because in the second part of this lesson we will go more in detail on the bottom-up approaches and the future of rural areas.